Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show. So a man walks into a bookstore and he says, hey, I want to buy Donald Trump's new book on immigration. And the bookstore proprietor says, get the hell out of here. The guy says, yeah, that's the name of it. I heard that at the Turning Point USA conference in Detroit. Amazing speeches by President Donald Trump and many, many others. And it was there that I said that I had buried the hatchet with Steve Bannon. I really do think that there are serious constitutional issues involved in his current fighting of the House subpoena. I would have recommended that he assert his Fifth Amendment rights as I did, but he chose to go a different route. There are serious executive privilege issues in his case. So I call for justice in that case. Joining me now is a man who is a legal pugilist. He is a brawler. If you're a client or an American and you want a lawyer who will fight for you, a man of enormous courage, and that is why my good friend Joe McBride now joins us on the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger, how you doing?
I am very honored to have you, my friend. There's so much going on that I want to get your opinion on, but very recently you texted me and you asked me to send you a list of the biographies of former President Richard Nixon, our 37th president, that I recommended. And I sent you a short list, a great book by Conrad Black, which may be one of the definitive biographies. But, of course, there's Richard Nixon's own memoirs, plus his earlier book, Six Crises, which you said made quite an impact on you. So what is your assessment of the president that whose detractors used to call him Tricky Dick?
You know, I think that he was a brilliant guy. I was very surprised to learn about the similarities between what happened to President Nixon and what's happening to President Trump. Look, lots of these things happened before I was born. I was born in 1978. I remembered him growing up, but I really didn't understand the gravity of the things that took place. And as I began to listen to people like you and Monica Crowley talk about him, I started digging into the situation and digging into the life. And I was astounded by the similarities. I was astounded by how much good he wanted to do for this country and the vicious attack that he came under by the deep state because of it. And the similarities of what's happening with you, what's happening with Bannon, what happened with G. Gordon Liddy, Richard Nixon, Donald Trump. It's all the same. It's the same playbook over and over again. And most people don't know it. I didn't know it. I'm learning about it. And I think that the general public, members of my generation, Generation X, and people younger than me need to understand what took place so we can understand what they're going to do next and what the roadmap is going forward.
Joe, what you say is absolutely true. First of all, Nixon's incredible record gets buried in the ashes of Watergate. I mean, he gets us a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets. He ended the war in Vietnam on a much faster timetable than the Pentagon wanted it. He did away with the military draft. We went to an all-volunteer army. He gave us the 18-year-old vote. If you're old enough to die for your country, you should be old enough to vote. He gave us the Environmental Protection Agency. I think he would roll in his grave if he saw how overregulated we are. But at the time, there were no regulations. And there are wealthy people willing to despoil our air and our water and our soil to make a buck. Regulations gone too far in the other direction pushed by big government. But the initial concept in the spirit of Theodore Roosevelt, the great conservationist, is a huge accomplishment. He is also the president who desegregated the schools. Overwhelming, I think 86% of the schools in the country were still segregated when he became president. By the time he left, that had dropped to the teens, without violence, without bloodshed. He's also the president who gave us affirmative action, something many of my conservative friends strongly disagree with, but recognizing the past injustices against black Americans. He set up the Office of Minority Business Investment, making low-interest loans through his program Black Capitalism, which, interestingly enough, is very similar to President Donald Trump's Platinum program, which I think will have enormous impact in the urban communities. I'm glad you particularly like Six Crises. Six Crises was Nixon's first book. He wrote it after being defeated in the 1960 election. It's the first year in his life he ever made any real money. It was from the book. The Kennedy administration would have Nixon audited that year and for the next 3 years, speaking of the abuse of power.
Indeed, Roger. You know, I thought that, especially in the Six Crises, the way that he talked about his defeat, what he learned from it, those experiences, and how he forged a way forward and eventually became the president of the United States was absolutely fantastic. And I was taken back by how, I don't know, down to earth and humble he is and was in his writing. I really connected for a bit because I believe in life, especially as a trial attorney and as a man in this country and in this world. You learn by your experiences. It's not about how many times you fall down. It's about how many times you get back up and your willingness to persist until you achieve your goal. I share that in common with him. I know that you do. I know that President Trump does. And that is a part of the spirit and the ethos of this country that is lost on many of us. And you just gave this beautiful litany of President Nixon's accomplishments, and President Trump has a lot of them as well. And it seems like the deep state and Washington politicians in the swamp as a whole doesn't really like it when a candidate actually runs on something and then delivers on his promises for the American people. They much rather have somebody who will deliver on their backroom promises to the people in Washington, D.C. And that's why we need Donald Trump back in office.
You asked me the other day about G. Gordon Liddy. G. Gordon Liddy, of course, was one of the Watergate burglars. He was the ringleader of the Watergate burglars. He was a former FBI agent. I actually worked on Gordon Liddy's 1968 campaign for Congress. It's a very interesting development here because the man who brought G. Gordon Liddy to Washington, D.C. would later become president of the United States because of Liddy's actions. It is a little-known fact that in 1968, a former Deputy Assistant Duchess Attorney G. Gordon Liddy challenged Hamilton Fish of the Fish political dynasty for a congressional seat in the Republican primary in the mid-Hudson Valley. I lived in the northern tip of Westchester, and I volunteered for that campaign. Fish won the Republican primary, but Liddy had the Conservative Party nomination. There was a hard-charging challenge from a very wealthy Democrat named John Dyson, and party chiefs really feared that because Liddy would siphon conservative votes or Republican votes from Hamilton Fish, who, shall we say, was not the most charismatic candidate you ever met, kind of example of what happens when you marry your own cousin for the enough centuries. So they went to House Minority Leader Gerald Ford. Ford, in order to get Liddy, it was too late to get his name off the ballot, but in order to get Liddy to stop campaigning, then was able to secure a job during the Nixon administration at the Treasury Department for G. Gordon Liddy. It wasn't very long before Liddy got in trouble there because he was an avid Second Amendment proponent, and he was making speeches critical of the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. But then he was discovered by a man named John Dean. It was John Dean who recruited Gordon Liddy. It was John Dean who pushed him to prepare a campaign intelligence gathering operation, known later as Gemstone. It was Liddy who I think was taken in by the other members of the Berkeley team, all of them reporting to the CIA. Gordon Liddy was not an experienced FBI agent. I think he was putty in the hands of E. Howard Hunt and Bernard Barker and Eugenio Martinez and other of the Watergate burglars who were still on the payroll of the CIA. You see, the CIA knew about the Watergate break-in well in advance. In any event, Gordon Liddy causes the break-in of the Watergate. Watergate ultimately, after a long, epic fight over the executive privilege regarding Nixon's tape, brings Nixon down, and Gerald Ford becomes president. So in essence, when Ford got Liddy a job, he began the most unlikely sequence of events in American political history.
You know, Roger,
Liddy's
it
book,
reminds me a lot.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Roger. I was just going to say you're talking about the stuff that happened at Watergate and the op that took place behind it, the chess pieces that were moved around on the board. And without getting, too tinfoily hat here, and there's just a lot of similarities between Watergate and Richard Nixon and January 6th and Donald Trump. There are a lot of things that happened on January 6th that everybody, with eyes to see and ears to hear, knew that they were going to happen in advance. They let it happen anyway. The objective of the protest was to encourage members of Congress not to certify. People had a right to go down there and talk about it. Things got out of hand when they shouldn't have, and who lost? Donald Trump lost. Not only did the certification happen, he gets dragged under the bus and is still being dragged under the bus and prosecuted for this, along with countless of other American citizens because of what happened that day. So for me, in my heart and in my mind, when I juxtapose these two events in time next to each other, I look at Watergate, I look at January 6th, I look at Richard Nixon, I look at Donald Trump, I see a lot of the same things.
Well, it's certainly true in the case of Watergate. I mean, we now have declassified documents just within the last year that show the Watergate prosecutors, Nick Ackerman, Jill Wine-Volner, both knew of the CIA's involvement in the Watergate break-in, but neither one of them did anything whatsoever about it. Tucker Carlson's done a number of great segments on this. So the Central Intelligence Agency, which I have previously identified as a central player in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, also took down Richard Nixon in a silent coup for the same reason. Nixon says in his memoirs he was going to reform the national security apparatus and our intelligence agency to take power away from unelected bureaucrats. He had a deep distrust of the Central Intelligence Agency because first of all, they had shared the existence of the secret Bay of Pigs plan with candidate John F. Kennedy before the debates. Kennedy used it to torture Nixon on the debate stage, saying that the Eisenhower-Nixon administration wasn't tough enough on Cuba. And, of course, Nixon could not respond because he would be blowing the cover of a highly confidential government op that he was overseeing, later approved by John Kennedy himself to his great, I think, regret. Folks, if you just tuned in, we're talking to my good friend Joe McBride. He is a criminal defense lawyer. He's a noted attorney. He is an absolute fighter. When we come back, I want to focus on the January 6th investigation, and he's represented a number of January 6 victims. We're going to talk about that. So, folks, you remember, you can hear us anytime at WABCRadio.com, online, anytime, around the world, worldwide. But if you get the 77 WABC radio app, well, then you can go back later and listen to the shows you miss. Shows like Sid Rosenberg, shows like Larry Kudlow, shows like Curtis Sliwak, shows like my good friends Frank Morano, and, of course, not to mention Dominic Carter. So you want to get that 77 WABC radio app. Don't touch the dial. We'll be right back with Joe McBride.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. I am so proud to be a part of the 77 WABC radio family. This is the radio station I grew up listening to, driving my 1965 Volkswagen to and from John Jay High School and listening to Cousin Brucey. John Jay High School right there in Katona, New York. So I'm so honored to be in the family. And the dynamic lineup here on 77 WABC just really cannot be beat. So, folks, download that 77 WABC app to your cell phone and do it now. Okay, we're talking to Joe McBride. Joe has represented a number of victims, I would say, of the January 6th controversy. Joe, quick question, I guess a good place to start, is what do you believe happened on that day?
Well, I believe that on January 6th, well, it's a loaded question, and it's a tough question. I believe it was the biggest entrapment operation that the world has ever seen. I don't say that because I have a political alignment one way or another. I say that as an attorney who has examined evidence for the past 4 years and whose theories have been systematically confirmed through the sharing of evidence with other attorneys, through the sharing of evidence with the general public, and through the acquisition of evidence that the Department of Justice that has refused to turn over to us to be able to look at the situation and say, hey, there were think about this, Roger. On January 6th, President Trump asked people to walk peacefully down to the Capitol. On the way down to the Capitol, on Constitution in Pennsylvania, there were parade routes that were cornered off. There were no cars on the road. Any reasonable person would look at that and say that we have been granted permission to walk from the ellipse down to the Capitol and gather peacefully. And then when people get down to the Capitol grounds, the fences have been removed. Don't walk here, don't trespass here signs have been removed. They push up against the Capitol walls, and the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police start to rain down hellfire on them in terms of crowd control munitions that are not supposed to be used in any situation like the situation on January 6th. People were burned. People were shot in the face with rubber bullets. People were maced. People were beaten. And peaceful cheering protesters went from singing God Bless America and singing in the Our Father and singing How Great Thou Art and singing This Is Our Country and whatever it is to having to defend themselves. And a fight broke out. That should have never happened. But the people who went there that day relied on the D.C. government's representation, which says, hey, you can walk down this parade route, you can go there, and you can go in peace, and everything will be okay. And when they got down there, they got attacked, and fights broke out all over the place. That was completely unavoidable, completely foreseeable. It should have never happened. And you have to ask yourself, how do 500 and 600 men get assault charges against federal officers who have never had a parking ticket in their life? And the question is very easy to answer. Good men do not sit by and do anything when elderly people, the infirmed, and women are getting the crap kicked out of them in front of them. They say, hey, officer, you don't do that. Hey, officer, don't hit my wife. Don't hit that person. They can't defend themselves. And then they get involved. And that's what happened that day. And all of those men who acted in defense of themselves and defense of others got rung up, and are facing 20 and 30 years in jail. Now, most people aren't getting that time, but they're still getting 5, 6, 7, 8, in some cases 22 years of their life taken from them, and that's wrong. Now, everybody who went to the Capitol wasn't an angel. But when you juxtapose January 6th with the BLM and Antifa protests that happened, we know that stuff got lit on fire, cops got pushed, things got broken. And in none of those cases did any of those people get any serious jail time. So why is it that every single person who was a target of a DOJ investigation had their doors kicked in by the FBI like they were Osama bin Laden, have to facing decades of years in jail, hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal bills? And the answer is simple. They did it to chill free speech. They did it to send a message from one political party to the other that if you come, that if you gather, that if you protest, and if you display a show of force, we will kick down your door and drag you into jail.
Very, very succinct and very moving. Joe, you've had clients there. What are the conditions like in the D.C. gulag?
So the first 3 years, the conditions were really, really bad. The conditions aren't as bad in that particular facility anymore because we have fought very hard to change them. But it's not just the D.C. jail. There's what's considered like a gulag archipelago. There's all these other jails that are affiliated that the Department of Justice will send people out to pre-trial and hold them there for, it seems like, in perpetuity until these cases are called. Some of these cases take 3 years to go to trial. And you have a Fifth Amendment due process right. As a United States citizen, you are innocent until proven guilty. And you can only be punished for a crime after you've been convicted in court. Despite that reality, these men have been starved, beaten, held in solitary confinement for months and months and months at a time. Many of these guys are military veterans with PTSD, or they're older people who have serious medical and health issues, and they've been tortured. When you have diabetes, when you have a lung problem, when you have a heart condition, when you have any regular condition that takes medical care and a specific diet to manage well in the world, and then you're thrown into a jail pre-trial, and they refuse to even acknowledge that you have the condition, and then they feed you food that poisons your body and makes your diabetes go out of control, makes your heart rate go out of control, causes your cancer to grow. They're knowingly doing that to these people because they simply don't view them as human. And this is a very, very big problem. And I wish I could say that there was a reasonable solution for it, but there's really no solution for it. Because when I get up there and I give these very impassioned arguments and I lay out all the evidence for these judges, look at what has happened to these people. 8 months in solitary confinement, 9 months you've got cancer, no medical care, whatever it is, they don't care. And that's the scary thing about January 6th. You have this erosion of our freedoms that happened with the Kennedy assassination, and then we talked about what happened with Nixon. You have all these different attacks, but that has usually been, one intelligence agency versus another, or people in government who are going back and forth to jostle for power. But this is the first time in the history of our great republic that the American people are being targeted for their political beliefs, and the judges in D.C. court aren't doing anything about it. And Roger, there's really no good answer about it.
Joe, I'm sorry I got to stop you there. I want to thank you for coming to the Roger Stone Show. Folks, hold on, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.